This is actually the highlight of my week.
Yeah, it was a world filled with climate deniers.
Nah, man, chicks dig it. They love it.
It's because the plot had to happen. So Fergel's off cleaning a bunch of crusty old socks.
Son, are you doing rough tucks?
By late night cable, you mean like late night cable, right? So edit all that out.
Hello and welcome to Movie
Hello and welcome to Movie Smash, the podcast that looks at comic book movies outside the MCU that you may or may not remember. If you're the type of person that enjoys talking about hidden gems or just likes to tear old movies apart, this is the place for you. And with that, let's get started. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Roberts. I'm the founder of Off Panel Creations. With me today, I have Jeremy Parmentier.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Parmentier, one of the hosts of the Retrovaniacs podcast, and I was also stuck in a weird glass pane and shot through space.
And Fergel Amayo.
I'm Fergel Amayo, laughing uncontrollably because that was quite witty. And I am the owner of Gotham Knight Comics, where we believe nerddom is the only dumb to have. And at that point, let's get down to some true justice and American way.
And our movie today is 1978's Superman, the movie, starring Christopher Reeves, Gene Hackman, and Marlon Brando, directed by Richard Donner.
His name is Kal-El. He will call himself Clark Kent. But the world will know him as Superman. This year, Superman brings you the gift of flight. Superman, the movie.
First things first, and I assume I know the answer to this question, but how familiar are you with Superman?
Slightly familiar.
He is kind of iconic, so if you don't know him, I'm kind of surprised.
It's a sad place. Well, if you don't know him, then you know the $6 million that his book just got on the auction block.
Do you guys remember the first time you saw this movie?
I do. I saw it on TV. We owned it on VHS. So it was when video cassettes were a thing, we rented it. And when it was broken, we rented it. So it was just a continual thing growing up. Soundtrack was amazing, like Star Wars.
Oh, yeah, the soundtrack was incredible. We watched this a ton. We didn't own it on VHS. I would have said we owned it on VHS as a kid, but really, my dad had copied off HBO. We had a lot of tapes that were just copied off HBO. They all had that same intro. But we had, this movie and, Star Wars wasn't copied off HBO. We actually did own those. But this, Star Wars, The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, there was like a handful of movies that we probably watched 5,000 times. This is one of them.
Yeah, I was the same way. This is one of the many VHSs that we had. And you're like yourself, we did not actually own the VHS. It was a copy of HBO or maybe a copy of a copy, like many of the movies growing up.
I feel like I got ripped off, man. I feel like my mom went and bought it. We made her buy it.
You got to remember, back then, VHSs were not that cheap.
No, they were not.
Obviously, I think for the three of us, we've all seen this movie many, many times. You probably can't pinpoint your original memories of this, but do you have any memories of this growing up?
Superman, Christopher Reeves. Like from when I was a kid, when you think about superheroes, when you just think about everything that relates all the way up to the latest movies, they all start with this one guy putting on tights and not just owning the role, but you just couldn't separate Superman from Christopher Reeves. Brilliant.
My memories of this movie are kind of hard to separate from the sequel because the VHS that happened to have this on it had both this and the sequel. As we're going to talk about, I'm sure, kind of intended to be viewed as a block. So it's hard for me to piece together my thoughts of just Superman the movie apart from Superman 2. However, what I did remember this movie is that I didn't care for it as much as what is the sequel. I thought it was a little bit slow, but it's Superman, and therefore it was super cool at the time. And I remember that the effects were better than I imagined them being, even in my memory, which we'll decide if that's still the case in 2024. But that was what I walked into this remembering, like, the effects for this weren't terrible, and I don't remember a ton of the plot of this aside from the sending the rockets to the fault. But other than that, I couldn't remember much about this movie specifically, apart from the second one, because I think the second one is more what you'd be expecting, but you need this movie to build the second one.
And you're talking about, just so my memory, because I feel old today, we're talking about Zod, right? Second one, Zod. Okay.
Second one, Zod.
Absolutely. I completely agree with your commentary, Jeremy.
So it's funny. Yeah, I remember having seen this movie several times as a kid. But of the Superman trilogy, the one I remember the most was actually the third movie with Richard Pryor, just because I thought he was funnier. And as a kid, I liked humor. And actually weirdly remember more about the Supergirl movie than I did these movies going into it. I can't pinpoint which, when I watched it, just that I watched the hell out of that VHS tape.
You didn't record over that tape. I know we recorded over one or two with late night cable, but we didn't record over that one.
By late night cable, you mean like late night cable, right? Because I know I had some of those too.
They were in the middle of movies. That's the way you did it.
Yeah, nothing like watching, the Ewok Adventure and then it scrambles and it's late night TBS.
You got the Red Shoe Diaries on there. There's no reason not to have it. It's worth it.
That was great. Oh, hey, fun fact. This was the first real use of a green screen in a real way. What made this movie so expensive was the technology at the time.
And we'll get more into that too in a little bit. But Fergel, obviously this is one of the most iconic characters out there, but do you have any little bit of history or recent facts about Superman for us?
Well, so, I mean, it is one of the most, Joel Schuster, Jerry Siegel. Originally, that we talk about, and again, I mentioned it earlier, so I'll say it again. One of the heritage conditions of this particular book at an 8.5 grade sold for $6 million. Truly, there are less than 100 copies globally of this book at any condition whatsoever. And that's going all the way down to 0.5 up to, 8.5, which I think is the highest. Might be a 9 out there somewhere on some billionaire's wall. But this is an iconic book, an iconic cover. But it was actually the first story was 1933, The Reign of Superman by Jerry Siegel. That's the first debut black and white copy. And it introduced the entire golden era of comics. So the golden age started with this book and moved on from there. That's why this and Detective Comics are two of the most valuable books. And then you go into several years later, Spider-Man and Hulk and so on and so forth. But these were the ones that led the way.
So if this is your first time joining us, just a quick heads up, we're going to be discussing the plot of this very old movie. And with that, we may be discussing certain elements of the story that might be considered spoilers, so consider yourself warned. If you haven't watched it, I don't know where you've been living for the past 40 years. Jeremy, would you like to cover the plot for us?
Sure. The plot of Superman the movie is essentially Superman's origin story. So you get to see Superman narrowly escape the destruction of his home planet Krypton as his father sends him away to the planet Earth, either because he knows the planet Earth is safe because their sun is not going to explode like it is at Krypton, but also maybe that he knows that the sun will give his son superpowers. So Superman then lands on Earth as a child where he's adopted by the Kents, a farm family, who raise him as their very own. And you get to see some glimpses of Superman's upbringing. He finds out he has super strength, he can run super fast, but generally he tries to keep those things somewhat hidden. He realizes, because of what his Earth father has told him that, he needs to use this for good to help the Earth, but some people might not understand. Right around the same time he would graduate high school and decide what he's going to do with his life, his Earth father passes away, and he finds kind of the proof of his extraterrestrial origin, a crystal that came with him in the satellite. He then takes that out to the middle of the Arctic, where he plants it in the ground, builds his fortress of solitude that looks kind of like Krypton, where he not only has, kind of his home on Earth that's his, it's also kind of a tie to Krypton, but it has all the teachings that he would have been sent with it to kind of train him. So the first, third of the movie ends with him emerging from the Fortress of Solitude as a full-grown Superman who then heads off to Metropolis to live amongst humans as mild-mannered Clark Kent, a reporter at the Daily Bugle, where he can also use his powers to do good for the world. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor, who's played by Gene Hackman in this movie, is a criminal mastermind, and he's decided that in order to get as rich as he can very quickly, he's going to buy a ton of cheap or basically worthless desert land that conveniently is located all around the San Andreas Fault. And his plan is to find a way to hack into some military missiles that are being used for tests and shoot them and have them land directly around the fault to cause a chain reaction, causing the biggest earthquake that the world has ever seen, which would also cause California to fall into the ocean and all this previously worthless land to now be beachfront property, making him millions and millions and millions of dollars. Unfortunately, this plan also would cause the deaths of millions of people, so will Superman be able to learn about Lex's plan and stop him in time to save millions of lives? And that's the plot of Superman the movie.
That's a great synopsis. This movie is littered with a variety of characters. Besides Superman, which ones stand out to you guys the most?
Marlon Brando. I just thought he was awesome. I love Lex Luthor, and I know Jeremy's going to talk about him, so I'm going to leave that out there, but I think Marlon Brando. Christopher Reeves made the movie. It is a really hard character, and his father did, so there are lots of retellings, and some of them they did know it was a yellow sun, it was a younger son. They kind of foreshadowed in the beginning with the red sun on Krypton, kind of leading to that destruction, but I thought Marlon Brando was spot on, and I thought Christopher Reeves carried the weight just brilliantly.
Yeah, Christopher Reeves as Superman is fine. He's kind of like the as Clark Kent, he still kind of sells as this sort of lovable loser, even though he's literally just Superman with glasses on, but still works somehow where he can kind of go back and forth between the confidence of Superman and the feigned nerdiness of Clark Kent. But Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor is great. I mean, he sells the movie. I think there's a lot of logic lines that this movie just takes jumps that I don't think necessarily make sense, especially tied to Lex Luthor. But I do think he's a great villain. This version in this movie specifically is not the one. If you read Superman comics now, Lex Luthor is kind of like this bald, super genius, super rich, this guy seems more like a criminal mastermind, but not quite on that same par. Now, maybe that's just my misreading of the background. But either way, I thought he was a great villain for this because he does kind of have a realistic scheme. The rest of this movie, everything except for Superman himself, is still pretty realistic. So even his scheme, technology aside, is a believable scheme. He's not trying to build supervillains. He's not trying to, make a giant robot suit and take over the world. He's like, no, I'm going to take this military weapon and use it to my benefit, to make a ton of money, and maybe half the country falls into the ocean, but that's not my problem. I'm going to own beachfront property. Like, I liked it for that. I do think that Marlon Brando was good as Superman's father, Jor-El, although I know that Marlon Brando phoned this entire thing in, so I do have that in the back of my mind as I watch it. But it's still, it was fine for what it is. He's not in the movie very long. I mean, really, it's Christopher Reeve and Gene Hackman with some other folks who are okay.
I did find Gene Hackman's portrayal of Lex Luthor to be a very sort of fun one. It reminded me more of a true comic book villain from that time period versus sort of the Lex Luthor we get these days, which is sort of the shrewd businessman. Gene Hackman almost didn't do this role. He didn't want to shave his mustache off for the role itself, and Donner, the director of it, had to convince him to do it. And the way he did it was he said, "Hey Gene, if you cut your mustache off, I'll cut my mustache off." So he goes there. Gene shaves his mustache off, and Donner just peels his off. Donner's never had a mustache. Gene Hackman had never met the guy, so he didn't know that.
Well, and he also wouldn't shave his head for this movie. He would not. And Marlon Brando was paid $14 million for 10 minutes.
Yeah, Gene Hackman would not shave his head till the very, very end of the movie. We wore like a skull cap, but so that's why throughout the movie, Gene Hackman's hair changes to basically illustrate he's wearing a hairpiece that keeps changing throughout the movie. But there were actually 3 other people considered for the role for Lex Luthor, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this one. George Kennedy from Naked Gun.
No way.
Jack Nicholson.
It could have worked. Immediately, and this wouldn't have been my thought in 1978, clearly, because I would have been one. But even aside from that, even if I wasn't one in 1978, you wouldn't think, oh, well, he's the Joker. But I think he's a much better Joker. So I'm glad he wasn't Lex Luthor in this.
Bingo.
And Dustin Hoffman.
No. It's just too much of the Rain Man.
I think Dustin Hoffman could pull it off. Again, that's later. He wasn't Rain Man in 1978. I think he could have pulled it off. Dustin Hoffman's a great actor. He could have done it.
I don't know. It's a little tough.
Jeremy, I'm glad that you brought up that Brando phoned it in. And Christopher Reeves felt the same way. In fact, in several interviews after the movie came out, he kept bringing that up. And Brando is notoriously a lazy actor. He doesn't memorize his lines. In fact, when the scene where he's holding baby Kent up in the air and he's talking to him, he's reading the lines off the diaper.
Yeah, I fully believe it.
Stop. I did not know that.
Yeah, he was paid originally $3.7 million for the movie, plus a percentage of gross. He worked only 12 days. And he also got a payment for the sequel because they filmed both movies at the same time. And he received a total of $14 million, as you mentioned it, for about 10 minutes of screen time. But Brando then sued because he said, I deserve $50 million for this movie. Yeah, Brando's not a nice guy.
I didn't know that. That just changes my whole perception of Brando.
There are plenty of stories about Brando and everything, 70s and beyond, where he just kind of shows up, does his thing, doesn't give... he's not polite. He's not worth. He doesn't put time in. It's just like, well, I'm Brando, so you'll pay me. And he doesn't seem to care.
I did not know that.
He was such a hard person to work with. They hired a PA, a production assistant, just to convince Brando to get out of his trailer in the morning because Brando would be paid more if they hit overage time. So Brando would stall so they would go to overtime, which he'd make more money. And the PA for this was nicknamed Rocky because he would fight with Brando every single day to get him out of his trailer. And his name was Cary Elwes.
No way. Look, so now you guys are blowing my mind right now. These are true facts. I honestly did not know that about Brando. Like, I thought the role was good, but then again, I'm just thinking about this. I've shown this at my store. I've shown this on the big screen, but it didn't seem phoned in. But now that you say it, I can see why you say it. Like, I can see why it sounds phoned in.
So Brando wasn't all bad. The S for the House L that's on his shirt was actually his idea to add that. So what his suggestion was actually became canon for Superman. So I found the story of Brando on the set of Superman, and Brando is notorious about testing directors and seeing how far he could push them because obviously he didn't want to work too much. And he came to the director of the movie and asked him, hey, Kryptonians, nobody knows what they look like. Nobody knows what they sound like. Here's an idea. Instead of me just being a floating head, why don't we make me a floating giant green bagel? And I talk with electronic voice because nobody knows what Kryptonians sound like.
Was he high?
No. This is actually a thing Brando did on various sets to see how far he could push the director. Normally he says he wants to be a green suitcase, just like replace my character with a green suitcase. But nice. Donner had been warned about this from a previous director and just told him to shut up.
Nice. By the way, did you know they shot this movie during the 1977 blackout?
Oh, yeah. They actually, I forgot what the paper was at the time, like the daily paper, but they actually used the generators from the set to make sure the paper went out on time the next day. So obviously the character Superman was going to become very iconic if they did this right. And there are quite a few people considered for the role. I'm not going to go through them all. There's, I think, well over 15 of them, but I want to get your guys' take on just a couple of these. Now, this first one I think would have been an interesting take. Muhammad Ali.
Would have been a disaster.
Yes, it would have been a disaster. It would have thrown the whole thing off.
It would just be Muhammad Ali in a Superman outfit. Like, it's not like he's going to do anything else but be Muhammad Ali.
No, that's 100%.
Warren Beatty?
No.
That could have worked, I guess.
Maybe, I don't know. But there's no excitement in the voices, so I think
well, that's because I'm thinking of what, Dick Tracy. I mean, I don't know, like Warren Beatty, 1978. I'm trying to think of something I could compare it to. But
Dick Tracy, there it is. Just keep Dick Tracy in there.
Here's one for you: Burt Reynolds.
See, that would be incredible. I would pay to see that today.
So that would actually be incredible. So Burt Reynolds is a badass actor. So let's just leave it right there. I think he could do it.
How about an Al Pacino?
No, not at all. He's a raging bull.
No, that's De Niro.
Oh, that's De Niro. Oh, look. Wow. I just threw that completely off. Somebody needs to take my cool card in the comments.
I mean, there are several more, but there's only two more I want to highlight. First, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Nope. Again, body shape works, but that's it.
And that's actually one of the reasons why he was considered for it.
They could dub the voice.
It would be like the television show Incredible Hulk. It would be awful.
That was great.
And the last one was Sylvester Stallone.
I mean, honestly, I think he would have been great. Because then it could be Superman was the law.
Wow.
And actually, the reason Sylvester Stallone did not get it was, back to Brando again, he had veto power over the lead role because Brando was actually the top bill for this movie. He thought Sylvester Stallone was, quote unquote, too ethnic.
Isn't Marlon Brando Italian?
I think he is.
And isn't Sylvester Stallone Italian?
He is.
That's interesting. Wasn't Paul Newman also considered for Superman in this at one point?
I didn't have that in my notes.
I actually could have swore I saw somewhere Paul Newman turned down the lead role, fearing it would overshadow his own persona.
That one I've not heard. That's interesting.
So we've gotten all that out of the way.
You sort of hinted at the effects earlier in our conversation. How did you guys feel about these effects? Do they hold up, and how do you think they felt for the time?
Two lenses. $55 million it took to make this movie. So circa 1978, absolutely cutting edge. Almost all of it was cutting edge. And it was really good. And they look incredibly cheesy. But keep in mind, like when you were a kid and you watched this, I thought Bruce Leroy caught the bullet in The Last Dragon. Like I literally thought he caught the bullet. And when he glowed, I wanted to glow. So, I mean, I was pretty believable and gullible as a child. So I'll take it.
Yeah, no, I think they work well. Yes, it's got some green screen work, but there are also plenty of actual effects like cranes and such for the shots. So I mean, it does work. It just definitely looks dated, but I think it still looks acceptably dated. Like you can tell that what you're watching probably looked amazing in 1978, unlike some of the sequels, specifically 4, that look terrible at the time and look worse today.
I agree with you guys. The effects look great for the time. Some of them still hold up. Like I like the helicopter scene.
Yes, that does hold up well.
It's amazing when you look at it. Like it looks like a helicopter crashing, goes through a building at one point. It leans off the edge. I mean, there's some shots from like the ground level looking up that look a little cheesy. They're obviously blue screen, but it is there.
Can we add Jeremy's thought process though on Superman 4, The Quest for Peace? Because that was horrible. That was horrible in so many ways that it was just hard to describe.
Well, hold on to that till we review that movie. We'll get to it. And while speaking about effects, and I always like to try finding a way to trash on Brando, during pre-production, they're trying to show off some of the effects. So they have this pre-production meeting in Italy. They're trying to show off like how they make Superman fly. And the technique they used at that time failed. They ended up spending $2 million on that, and it was a failure. But Brando could not join them in the meeting in Italy because he had a warrant out for his arrest. And at the moment he walked off the plane, he would have been arrested.
Oh, that's perfect. That just rounds it all off. You just took the whole luster off of Marlon Brando. So I'd like to thank everybody that joined in on this. We're all no longer Marlon Brando fans.
Hey, look, you have to like the work. You don't have to like the person.
That is true. It's all about separating the artist from the art itself.
Agreed.
What scene stood out to you guys?
When he reversed time, that was the one. I watched this again, just kind of, and I didn't watch because I've seen this movie so many times, I could recite it in my sleep, but I did watch that reverse time thing because they foreshadowed it in the beginning and they took it to the end. And I thought that was like, he turned the whole world, which was completely hypothetically impossible, but he did it anyway. I guess that was his greatest power, reversing time, which is new.
Well, he doesn't really. I mean, he reverses time, but the way he does it, I guess we can talk about. But the helicopter scene you just mentioned is one that I think holds up really well. I think Generally, the scenes where he's, just saving people, the train, anything that you see where he's being Superman is fine, and it looks really good. I actually want to go back to the very beginning of the movie, the Krypton scenes. Those really stand out for me, despite the fact that I don't really understand why the other people of Krypton aren't like, yeah, we're probably in a lot of danger. Every time you see Krypton, first off, everything is shaking. Everything looks like it's about to fall apart. And it goes out to see a picture of the sun, which is so big. Like if you walked out of your door right now and saw the sun was 90% of the sky and right, you'd be like, yeah, we're probably fucked. This is it. We're done. But instead, everyone on Krypton's like, nah, you're full of it. You're a crazy man. I don't get why you think we're in trouble. I don't understand that. But I do like how Krypton looks.
We had an eclipse today, so.
Well, that's true. The eclipse today, whenever you're listening to this, we did this during the eclipse. So I guess if you're listening to it in 2045, you don't know which eclipse I'm talking about. But if you listen to it today, you know. The way Krypton looks, it looks very much like, and I know it's on purpose, that's why the Fortress of Solitude looks like it does, but the angles, like the angular crystal parts of everything, I like how it looks. I don't understand the logistics of actually living there, but I think it looks cool.
Yeah, it was very Flash Gordon, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it definitely does.
100%. And it was a world filled with climate deniers, essentially. They were all like, it's not going to happen. The sun's not going to blow us. In fact, one of the people on the council was like, oh, it's just a shifting of the orbit. It's a natural thing. Don't worry about it.
Super advanced race, like millions of years ahead of us, because that's how long it takes for a sun to go red. And so that's supposed to be a super advanced race, and they can't see it. The world's going to end in front of them. So that means that smart people can be dumb too.
Well, I was watching a retrospective on this movie, and everything's like crystals. And they said the reason they leaned into that because at that time, crystals were like a big thing, right? Healing crystals and spiritual crystals. So they thought an advanced race would probably have those kinds of things.
That's interesting.
I think it works because, again, it makes the Fortress of Solitude look like it does, which also kind of works. It's just I don't know. The whole logic of this is a race so advanced that they can make a capsule that will take a child across the galaxy from a planet they've never heard of to the people of Earth have never heard of to Earth. And he's only aged like a year and a half, right? And this thing, it's like they have all this technology. And meanwhile, like he couldn't skate. Why didn't he build a slightly bigger one and take his family off? They're like,
I never got that. In all the iterations of Superman, even the most recent one, which I thought was my favorite, Cavill's one of my favorite ones. And I thought, even in that scenario, why couldn't they have built a bigger pod to take him to Earth? Like that felt to me like that was part of the smart, dumb people. You couldn't make an extra big pod?
It's because the plot had to happen.
Well, of course, you got that. That all makes sense, and it's not gonna. Again, this movie, that's one of the least unbelievable things, right? That's totally fine. It's just one of those things that, as watching it now, I'm like, I still don't quite get why that no one believed me. Like as a kid, I was just like, I must be missing something, but now I'm like, no, I'm not missing anything. Everyone here is insane. They just don't see the danger. And then as soon as it starts, they're like, oh, how would we have known as the planet falls apart on top of them? So it's just like, okay.
I watched this movie with my kids, and we were talking about that scene where the world is ending. And we were talking about how in a movie today, they would just show it blowing up. But that scene was really long of watching all those people die over and over and over again.
Yes.
Let's be clear. This movie is long. This movie is not fast.
No,
it is a long-length movie, and it depends which version you're watching. I'm not 100% sure which cut I end up watching. I watch whatever's on HBO Max right now. But it's not the director's cut, but it's some cut of this movie. But the first time we see legitimate Superman, which is when he comes out of the Fortress of Solitude after having all his training or whatever, is 49 minutes into this movie.
Did you really time that, Jeremy? Did you put that on the clock?
I have nothing better to do with my time. Yes, it's in fact true. I did time it.
That is phenomenal. Bravo to you, sir.
So you're right. So what you watch, the same one I watched, is 2.5 hours long. We'll get the pacing in a bit. But there was a Donner cut that came out years later, which added a few bits here and there. And then there was a Superman for the television that came out even after that. And what had happened for that one's actually 3+ hours. I imagine there's that much extra footage. And the reason was that was that long was because they were paid by the minute of how long this movie was. Yeah, not how good it was. But back to Krypton. What did you guys think of those glowing costumes that they had?
Those were actually cool. That sort of, if you're trying to set the tone of the movie, which to Jeremy's point didn't make sense because if they were so advanced, how do they crap on crystal toilets? I don't understand. It just didn't feel right. But I liked the uniforms. They sort of conveyed this idea that they were advanced and above us all.
I know that was an accidental effect that ended up looking cool, and I think that's awesome. Anytime you accidentally figure something out and realize this is better than what we had planned, you go with it, and they did 100% this time. Yeah,
they sewed these little glass balls into it so we get like a shimmer effect, but because the way the lighting was, you just blew out the sensors and made that sort of glowing effect for their costumes. So completely accidental.
I didn't even know that. That's another fact I didn't know about this movie. Holy crap.
So it's also funny too like I watch this when I try to watch these movies with my kids because they don't have the nostalgia glasses on when they're watching it. And what was interesting too was the main theme of the classic theme of Superman is coming on, right? And I'm like humming away with it like an idiot. And my kids go, "Why is a Star Wars theme playing?"
Oh, God bless America.
No. What's funny about that was, so I was like, you know what? There is some similarity to it, but both the theme of Superman and the Star Wars theme are both from the original source material for that is a song called King's Row. So they actually come from the same original piece.
Not to throw this out there, but if you've listened to this podcast and you've heard our theme, it's essentially the same song. It's just not. It's the free to use version of the Superman theme that I found online. It's called like Mighty Man Heroes or something. But I was like, yeah, it's not really Superman, but everyone will know what we're aiming for. It's exactly the theme.
It's distinct enough where you don't get sued.
That's perfect.
One thing I do want to talk about is the fact that it feels like upon reviewing that is really 3 different movies smashed together. You have the Krypton scenes, which has its one feel to it, the Kansas scenes, which have a feel to it, and then the Metropolis, which has a very different feel to it.
Yes, I think that was the purpose of the comic. They were trying to pick up on the comic, and then there was there was an original Superman, a black and white Superman show in and around that same. So they were trying to figure, I think that you get a little bit of that thing, kind of the whole picture of it. And I think Donna was trying to bring the whole story to life. That was the goal. If you look at Superman now, and I don't know if have you guys ever been close to an Action Comics? Has anyone ever seen one?
I mean, not like that one. I've seen Action Comics, like, because it's still around. But
number one, Action Comics number one. Have you seen? So I've had the opportunity to read Action Comics number one, like the real version of it, and it really does feel just like that.
I'm not sure my Loot Crate exclusive reprint of Action Comics number one is worth anything at all.
Now that 1938 one, that one's, I mean, you could have a 1.5 grade on that book and be sitting on 15 to 25, maybe 50 grand.
But as I was saying, this movie is really, for me, tonally felt like 3 different movies. How do you guys feel about the tone of this movie?
I liked where you were going. I mean, I think it is 3 different movies. I think it really is. Again, it's like that material, the source material, what they were trying to say. I think he was trying to tell you where he came from, how he grew up, and what he became. It's
hard for me to say that the tone of this movie is wrong in some way. Again, it's hard to take off the nostalgia glasses for a movie that I've seen my entire life, essentially, and is up until, Batman 11 years later was like the best superhero movie, like the blueprint for how to make a superhero movie. So it's hard to say that the tone's wrong of this movie, right? It's got that feeling where you get to see how Superman came to be. You get to see him growing up and see kind of that, like, he's just like you, but not really. He's learning what he is. And then, the parts that are in with adult Superman in Metropolis. So, like, I don't know. It was hard for me to say that the tone of this is wrong, but I guarantee if I would have watched this without that background, I would have thought it was, again, there's a lot of just Superman is almost too wholesome in this movie, and that's kind of how I feel about Superman in general. He's almost too wholesome. This one really does take it kind of that next level, where it's almost like, golly gee whiz, Superman.
And that's kind of one of the issues I've always had with Superman, because effectively he's invincible. He's a god.
But he's a human being, and that's why you got to watch Red Sun. That's why you really have to watch Superman Red Sun. You have to watch some different versions. You have to see, or like 1 Million Prime Superman, or different versions of him, or even the African American version of him, Val-Zod. And so there's just so many different versions of Superman now. Japanese, South Korean, they've got them everywhere.
I do like Superman Red Sun. It's a great. It was a great movie. I'd love to cover that sometime. So, guys, when it comes to this movie, what did you love about it? What would you have changed about it if you could change something?
I probably wouldn't have changed anything. I mean, yeah, it introduced Superman. I think part 2, now that Jeremy's mentioned part 2 and the sequel of it and the way it was put together, that made, it honestly should have, I don't know, it was a long first movie, but the second movie just kind of picked it up, and I like that. And the third movie even went better. I don't think you're going to change anything on a movie like this.
At this point, from watching it again, I think my biggest complaint, I didn't even mind how slow it was to get to Superman. I was fine with that, because you do learn a lot about the character. You kind of learn why he's not just coming to Earth as like I'm going to take the Earth over because I'm the strongest man ever. Why wouldn't I, right? He's got this balance of when he was brought up and the teachings he got from his birth father, plus all that he would learn from the Kents, and kind of humility and all that. So that I like that. I even like the awkward parts. I mean, the intentionally awkward parts with Clark and Lois, where it's just like he's kind of this, like, he doesn't know what to do as Clark, but then when he's Superman, it's very clear he knows what he's doing or whatever, right? So like I liked all that. My biggest complaints about this movie are all in, unfortunately, with Lex Luthor, who I thought Gene Hackman did a good job. I like the character, but there's all these like super jumps of logic that are really only apply to him that you need to make any kind of conflict in this, but it makes it where Lex just knows too much. For example, figuring out that Krypton would hurt him. Like, that came out of nowhere. They explain it, but they basically explain, like, I found a book and it says it might hurt him. Like, it's like, that's not really a thing. His whole plan, like, it doesn't explain how he knows how to really deal with all these nuclear weapons to make them reroute to the fault. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that is a big logic jump that they could have spent more time really delving into Lex Luthor more to make what he's doing make more sense. Like, again, his overall plot makes sense, but how he knows so much about Superman, how he knows how to stop him. The whole scene with Superman where they give him the Krypton and they put him like a tiny swimming pool. I don't know what the point of that was at all. Like, it's there to stall him for a minute. It's there for the plot, but it's like, if you were really going to be Lex Luthor and really stop Superman, again, this is like a James Bond villain move where you're like, I'm going to tell him my plan and then I'm going to put him in a small pool. There's no way he'll escape that. It's like, come on. I don't know. That's the part I dislike now, but I still like the movie. Lex Luthor ends up coming across as more of like less of a supervillain and more of just like a kind of a dopey mob boss. And I don't know. It's not what I feel for Lex Luthor, but I understand that is also setting up how he's going to kind of tie into the second movie as well to some level. So it's okay, but it's definitely the part I would change, is making Lex Luthor actually seem more lethal.
Yeah, you would say he's more like a cartoon character?
Well, it's a cartoon logic. It's I have an evil plan. I'm going to tell you my evil plan, and then I'm going to give you this thing that I think might hurt you. Like, what if that didn't work? What if his whole plan to give Superman a piece of kryptonite that he thinks is kryptonite, he's not even sure, he saw it in like a magazine clipping that a guy found a green rock, so he's like, okay, that's got to be kryptonite, and he gives it to him, and it causes him to immediately get weak, and he puts it like, he ties it to him on a chain. All that is great, but he didn't know that was going to work. He wasn't sure if he even had kryptonite, if kryptonite would hurt him, any of that. So before he even tests that out, he tells him his whole evil plan, and then manages to, like, lock him in a chain with the kryptonite, and then pushes him in a pool. It's just like, I don't know. It's such a goofy villain level. It's not a realistic villain. Like, again, his plot was, quote, realistic for this world. I was willing to accept that. The fact that he's living in some kind of abandoned subway under the city, okay, that's all fine and good with me. But it's the part where he does stuff that he's his own downfall. Yes, that's what every villain does to some level, but he really hams it up in a way that I think is over the top.
Tell me how you really feel.
Going into it and rewatching it feels a little bit, it's a good family movie. Having your kids watch it with you. That being said, it does have some serious issues in pacing. It is longer than it needs to be. And I think they spend way too much time on the front end of his origin story. I understand, yes, it's the first superhero movie. I understand why they did that. But for today's audience, you had this Flash Gordon scene, and then it switches over to what feels like a retrospective look upon small town America, which, yes, he comes from Smallville, but then it goes into sort of a comic book goofy level with Lex Luthor, as you're right. Too many logic jumps. I wish they had shortened down the 10 minutes that Brando was there and shorten down the Kansas stuff. We get it, right? If you were to remake this movie now, we understand that you can shorten that stuff up a little bit and then spend more time on the villain. Right? Why is he doing what he's doing? I mean, I understand he wants to make beachfront property, make these little towns named after his henchmen. He wants to do that. But you're right. He does jump to logic on things like, how does he know the Krypton work or the kryptonite works? Yes, Superman did an interview, which gives his backstory a little bit, but there's a lot of other little problems. And too, like my kids, like I said, it's a family movie. It should be good for that. But my kids had problems with it. My daughter, who's in elementary school, when she saw the time reversing scene, she just yelled at the screen, "That's not how time travel works."
That's the Avengers. That's the Avengers generation.
It might be Doctor Who too. Who knows? But when Lois Lane falls in the crevice in her car, the reason why we had the time travel, my daughter's screaming at it like, just get out of the car.
It's the same thing as when you watch Alien Covenant and they run away from the spaceship that's clearly just one big wheel by not running to the side, but just running forward. It's the same logic.
Well, that's how Dom Toretto beat the sub.
With what?
That's how Dom Toretto beat the sub in Fast and Furious. It was more fast, more furious.
I have not watched any of those movies past the first one. I gave up on those things so long ago.
Well, Dom Toretto took down a nuclear submarine.
That doesn't surprise me. And he says it's all about family the whole time,
It,
right?
it literally says it was all, and they were like, "It's glad to see you," and they just kept doing the same shtick with cars on ice and a nuclear sub.
So, question for you guys. Should people go out and watch this thing?
Yes, I think you can. I think you have to know what you're getting into. It's a Sunday afternoon. You're not going to find it. You can go look at it, maybe check it out if you've not seen it, which would be surprising. And I think it's worth a rewatch every once in a while, especially as Superman, that super high sale. I think it's a good opportunity to kind of because the news, everything you said about Lex Luthor was corrected in the Henry Cavill remake with Zod. Right? I mean, so every single point you hit on, both of you did, for how Lex Luthor was turned into a character was completely corrected when they gave Superman a better enemy. And they gave him an opportunity. And it was, you got the backstory, you got the middle, you got the end, you got why you should dislike this guy, what his motivation was. And they were just, and then the music behind it, it was phenomenal.
Well, I think the other part of it is in playing Lex Luthor this way, you didn't hate him, right? I mean, yes, he's the bad guy, but he's kind of like, oh, well, you didn't get your plan to work. Next time, maybe. Like, it wasn't, you didn't feel like he was that bad of a guy. Instead, you liked him. Like, he did such a good job with the character that you were like, oh, you know what? I like Lex Luthor. I think he's got a clearly bad idea here, and he did cause a lot of destruction. I want to go back real quick, though, to the, no pun intended, to the time travel scene. My other problem with this movie is so sure, Lex does succeed. He gets one of the missiles to hit where it's supposed to go. It causes a fault. Superman stops most of it, but it still causes enough damage that, Lois Lane gets stuck in like a earthquake crevice, and other, like the dam breaks, and all these people are going to drown and lose their houses and all this stuff. So like he does destructive damage, but he's not going to get his goal of having all beachfront property and having California fall into the ocean. But instead of like, why did he stop there? Why didn't he go back farther? Go back farther. You could have stopped Lex from the beginning, knowing that, okay, he launched these missiles. That probably means it was 5 minutes for. Go back 5 or 10 minutes for, and then find Lex Luthor. You can fly fast enough to go around the Earth 1,000,000 times a second. You could have flown and found Lex Luthor and stopped this entire thing from going from the get-go.
My kids pointed the same thing out. Like, what makes her so special in this? Why can't you save everybody else? Because New Jersey gets killed, right? Isn't that one of the places that Rocket's supposed to go?
No, that's the one he takes out. He shoots off into the sky.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he stops that one from hitting. The only one that hits is the one that he doesn't get to stop in time that starts the fault line. And then he stops the fault line from really going by flying under it and pushing up. I don't know. But it was still like, it didn't stop everything. So there's still enough damage, like earthquake damage from the whole thing. That's what kind of the aftershocks of this, right? Superman does stop the missile, but he doesn't stop the aftershocks that would realistically, I guess, happen. But it's just like, again, you can go back. If you figure out how to go back in time 3 minutes to save Lois Lane, go back an extra 5 and stop the whole damn thing.
Let's just end it on that. I think he was horny. I'm going to say it. Superman gets horny.
Look, I've gone pretty far to get some action, but he flew across a galaxy.
So for me, should people go watch this thing? I think if you have nostalgia for Superman, go back and watch it. Should you go out and find it? I mean, it's an afternoon. It's a long movie. Between this and Man of Steel, I prefer Man of Steel, but also Man of Steel is not the same audience. That's more of a more mature audience, which is why I think I enjoy that more than I did Superman. But Superman's, it's got some good feels. It's your classic Boy Scout Superman, right? There's no, will he do the right thing question? He will always do the right thing. Will he save the cat out of the tree? He will save the cat out of the tree. Except for I guess the big mistake he does make is he does not turn the time back enough to save other people, just Lois Lane.
Well, no, he does. I think because he stops the dam from breaking. He does all the things he needs to do. He stopped everyone else from dying. He just then only went back in time. He's like, all right, now I saved Lois too. We're like, just think, man. Another few minutes. You could have done a lot more. You could go back a lot farther than that. But I guess that was him counterbalancing what Marlon Brando's father, Marlon Brando as his father, was telling him, like, you can't change
time, son.
Well, yeah, that's what he did. He said, don't go back in time. No, he just said, like, don't change history. Don't change the world, like, in a massive way, which turning time backwards arguably would be that. So he did it just enough, I guess, to get his point across. I don't know. It's fine. As far as if I think you should watch this, I do think this is well worth watching. I think the sequel is 100% worth watching, and therefore you need to watch this. Because as we kind of talked about, they were filmed more or less at the same time, at least most of the second movie, with the idea of them being released, fairly close to each other. And there's a lot that this movie, even though the first scene of the movie is sending off Zod and the other villains off of Krypton. Like, so they lay all these eggs in the first movie that will hatch in the second, which is a far superior movie that does have a little bit of a darker tone and a lot cooler fight scenes. And like, it's a much more interesting movie, but you need this first one to see it. So I think you have to, it's worth seeing this to watch the second one. And I also would say, and maybe this is the dark horse vote on this, in the Superman series, Superman 3 is my favorite one. It's arguably the one that has the least to do with Superman. It's just like Halloween. Halloween 3 is the best Halloween, but it's really the worst in the series, but it's my favorite as a standalone movie. I think Superman 3 is a great movie for in the cheese factor. Like, as long as you can throw believability out the window, don't even worry about it. Just like more interesting characters, more interesting set pieces. I love the sequence at the end of that movie. Oh my
God. Yeah. The robot sequence. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's amazing. No,
you're not a dark horse. Let's get that back, right? Let's bring that together, right? You brought together great thought processes whatsoever, because Halloween 3 is the one movie I can sit through over and over again. It's just that cool. The song sticks in your head. The little masks, the whole Irish thing. It's great. I love it. It has nothing to do with Michael Myers, but it's phenomenal. And so, yes, Superman 3, Richard Pryor, and the computer situation, I love it. Love it.
Even Evil Superman. It's a wonderful movie, but it's not like, I think I wouldn't tell someone go out and find Superman 3 and watch it, right? I would tell someone go out and find Superman 1 and 2 and watch them. I think they're great movies. Obviously, Zod is such a good villain. They've reused him in the current iterations of Superman, and I expect it will happen again. That's how good those heroes are. You're not going to see the computer character from the third one, who I think is supposed to be Brainiac, but is not as much named, so used again, because it is wonderfully 80s cheesy, and it's perfect for what it is. But I would not recommend running out to see that one by itself. These two I would.
Agreed. If I were to recommend someone go see the first movie, you have to go into it accepting you have to see the second one with it. I mean, 75% of the second one was filmed at the same time as that first one. Right. It's like Dune, part 1, part 2. It's the same movie, just broken into 2 sections.
100%.
As I said before, Superman 3 is my favorite of that trilogy. As a kid, I loved it. And it's also where the whole, taking a penny off every bank transaction thing comes from. It's from Superman 3.
They say as much in Office Space. Like it's about Superman 3.
Do.
Exactly. It's a thing that everyone knows. So for you guys, will you guys go back and rewatch this movie?
Already did. I did. I was curious because we had showed it at our store. It was actually one of our best movie nights. We had probably 50, 60 people when I first opened the store. We showed this at the store, and it was huge. It was a big draw, and so I did watch it. And everything that's been said today is so spot on. But yet, I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan of the Man of Steel series. I cannot wait to see what they do with Superman Legacy. That's what I'm going to leave it right now. I cannot wait to see where they take this character next.
Didn't they drop the Legacy part of it? Just Superman now?
No, it's Superman Legacy. If I'm not mistaken,
No.
It's
like a month ago, they dropped the Legacy from it.
Did they?
Yeah, Gunn dropped it.
Oh, that'd be interesting because that's the whole Grant Morrison's. The entire story is this Superman. It's not like all-star Superman story. So if you've never read it, it's one of the coolest books, by the way. Or the movie is equally as phenomenal.
And what do you think, Jeremy?
I would. Again, I have not rewatched the second one recently. I did watch some of this with my younger son, who did like what he was watching, but he came in kind of like 2/3 of the way through the movie. So he didn't see the beginning parts. He just saw why is he doing that? Oh, can he fly? What's going on? He knew it was Superman, but I don't know. It's so old, maybe he didn't tie that it was in fact Superman. I don't know. But I would watch it again. Again, it's hard for me to say that this is really good or just nostalgic good. I've seen it too many times for it not to be a movie that I'll watch over and over again. It's just like, I love The Last Starfighter. I think it's a great movie. I've seen it 100 times. Is it really a good movie? No, it is not, but I like it.
I love that movie.
Empire. Are you kidding me? That's why we get along so well, because I was just thinking out loud, you are the last Starfighter. Defeat the Conan Empire.
It will be a while before I rewatch this movie again, because, nostalgia, I like it. I mean, but I saw it again. I saw that scene where Lois Lane is saying in her mind, "Can you read my mind?" scene, if you guys know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, when they're flying around, yeah.
Yeah, and the level of that just sort of takes me out of it now. I don't know why. It's so bad, that one scene. But I will probably rewatch it when I forget how bad that scene is again. But I will probably see the second one in a short term. But I probably haven't seen this movie in well over a decade, and I'll probably wait about a decade before seeing it again.
I will see number 3 probably tomorrow or sometime over the weekend when I have some time, because now I want to see number 3. I just think Richard Pryor is worth seeing. When he blows the gas back in the tanker, I think it's worth seeing.
He's great in everything. Obviously, there's been a remake, and there's talk of another remake, but do you think they should remake Superman again?
It's the cornerstone of Warner Brothers. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. They will never stop making movies about these guys. This is the cornerstone of their money machine.
Yeah, I think they'll continue to make Superman movies. I don't know if you necessarily need to remake, the plot of this, right? There's no need to do that. But they'll remake Superman movies and have a new Superman with a retelling of his origin, and that's all fine. And again, he is the pinnacle of superheroes, right? He is kind of if you're going to do a superhero movie, especially in the DC universe, right, you have to have Superman. So it's going to be there, just like Batman. I expect remakes of both of those till I die.
For me, I mean, yes, I would love to see another Superman movie. That means there's going to be a whole other DC, set of DC movies, and I love DC. I would also love to see, and I will probably never get this, a live action Red Sun or a live action God and Monsters? Gods and Monsters?
Gods and Monsters. Two of the best stories. First off, we should be petitioning for Red Sun Live Sun. Why isn't that in Elseworlds? That's $1 billion movie if it was live action and done well.
That's what I'm saying. I would love to see those kinds of stories of Superman, because Superman, well, he is Superman. Yeah, it's very hard to get the stakes right with a character like that. And yeah, I know you were saying that he's the cornerstone of DC with Batman, but Batman does better in the theaters than Superman does. And Wonder Woman, I love that first Wonder Woman movie that came out recently, well, in the past couple decades, but 84 was garbage. So back to this. So I would love to see them explore other parts of the Superman mythos or Elseworlds mythos when it comes to it.
I think that's where they're going. I think that's Gunn's whole philosophy. I mean, because they've said as much. Now, it could be because they're setting up for sale in the future, but if you look at the characters that have been put into this movie, or at least been recruited, his whole thing is to focus on Grant Morrison's Superman, which is a completely unique take on the Superman story.
So how would you guys rate this movie?
I'd give it a Fergel thumbs up.
Yeah, I'd give it a thumbs up, but you could clearly tell that it's behind, like on a screen. So whatever's behind me, that's like an awesome explosion, is clearly like there's a bad outline and a cape on it. But I would give it that.
For nostalgia purpose, I'd give it a thumbs up. For if you're not familiar with the universe, you didn't see this movie 30 years ago, it's probably give it 3/4.
Oh, and I'd say seek professional help, because somehow or another your childhood sucked.
Well, they could not have been born at this time, Fergel. Though our average demographic is 45 plus.
So I think I'm speaking to the right group of people.
Before we finish up, though, I do have a mailbag for today, guys. So this is from JW. I'm struggling with this week's episode, not because of you guys, but because of how much I hated Mystery Men. I think I was working at a movie theater when it came out. I had to go around in between the theaters to make sure people weren't having sex or otherwise being stupid. I just never walked into that scene, into a scene of that movie I liked.
Well, that's because he tied it to sex.
But then you'd hit every movie that was there, right? Wasn't that the problem you're going to see with every movie at the movie theater? Unless it was something specific about a Mystery Man, like, nah, man, chicks dig it. They love it.
Well, I think it's because it's so boring in the movies that you could get laid in the movie. But I mean, if he's walking into theaters where people are having sex, that's kind of a rough theater. Did you guys walk into theaters where people are having sex? Maybe a feelsky, but no sex.
I'm not going to comment on that one. So I think JW just has a little PTSD when it comes to Mystery Men. I love that movie. And obviously, if he was at least a teenager when that movie came out, he should revisit it, because he's probably at the right age where those puns are just hilarious.
Yeah, but I think we all probably have a movie or two or a song or something that no matter what happens, it's going to have a bad place in your mind because of what happened. So, you know what? If he walked in and a bunch of people giving off rough tugs, then sure, maybe he hates the movie and I'll give him that.
Oh, that's a new word in the lexicon. Thank you, Jeremy.
Guys, before we head on out, what are you guys currently working on, or what are you currently reading? And where can people find you?
You know, I'm probably going to read Red Sun. I'm going to try to enjoy that book later on this evening if I get a little moment to do so. I definitely want to be working on that. Right now, just working on taking care of my beautiful family, making sure they're up, continuing to build out a media presence and work through that process. But, loving life through the way.
Well, speaking of rough tugs, you can always find me at retrovania.net. We have the Retrovaniacs podcast. We do 5 episodes a month, 2 on our free feed and 3 for our patrons. I'm just working a lot trying to build that out. We're doing some more videos where we do toy and game hunts where we do not have rough tugs, but you could see some really cool old action figures.
He added rough tugs 4 times. Just count them out. That was 4 rough tugs.
Yeah, I'm just reading Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. No tugs happening there.
No tugs at all.
But if you're looking for me, I'm over at Off Panel Creations, and we're always doing something interesting over there. But I want to thank you all for joining us today. If you've enjoyed the show, please give us a review and share it with your friends. If you want to drop us a note, tell me how wrong I am, because everyone else really loves this movie. Or make a movie suggestion, just visit us at movie-smash.com, and thank you for listening.
You know, guys, the more I think about it, I should have said buttery tugs. We're talking about movie theaters.
please give us a review and share with your friends. If you want to drop us a note, tell us where we were wrong, or give us a movie suggestion, visit us at movie-smash.com.